Payton Soicher, rankingsrightnow.com. Oh, what a fun segment each and every week that we have. And Payton, you and I said this earlier, but we are going to start doing some college football playoff rankings things starting on Monday. We'll have a couple that will kind of preview it, and then a couple that will react to it.
Yep.
Or maybe react to what happened this weekend, so you can preview with the rankings, and then we'll figure it out. It'll change, it'll morph, it'll grow.
There's no shortage of stuff to discuss every week.
Yes, you sent me a treasure trove of information last night. Watch the video, all of that. So let's go through this with me like I'm 5, because this was a lot of info. The biggest thing is Notre Dame, and you can share the screen, but Notre Dame at number 2 for some of your projected rankings, and that would be above several teams that aren't undefeated, and we're running out of undefeated teams. It's getting down to the wire. But you have Notre Dame in one projection at number 2, Miami, who is undefeated all the way down at 10.
Correct. Okay, so like you said, there's a lot to discuss, and let's take it slowly at first. So one of the things that when I was playing around with these optimizations and these algorithms, and I was switching over from the AP over to the playoff committee, I didn't realize how used to seeing the AP rankings and taking them for face value of this is it, right? This is what we expect. This is the new situation. So before we get to the situation you just talked about, if we use the playoff committee rankings algorithm, but still base it upon the latest AP poll, this is what we look like. And it makes sense if you take the AP poll into context, right? Things are moving not nearly as dramatic as the AP poll, which was something that was driving me crazy, right? We have things that are playing nicely, teams that look right. If we get rid of any AP poll context and say, just give me the algorithm using the same AP preseason top 25, and just never reference the AP poll again, we run into this situation. And this is where things start to get really, really, really interesting, eyebrow raising, scratching your head of what in the world is going on. But as you mentioned right here, you have Notre Dame playing around at number 2 in the latest algorithm. Now, initially when I thought this, I said, oh no, there's a bug in my code. Something's wrong here. But if you take a look at Notre Dame's schedule right here, if you get rid of this Northern Illinois loss, which no one can seem to forget because it's one of the highlights of the 2024 season, right? If we think of all of the biggest games, this one comes to mind, right? No one expected this. They beat number 20 Texas A&M at the time, a 15 Louisville. Georgia Tech has been in and out of the rankings all season. Navy, they just dominated, right? Maybe this algorithm is saying that was so long ago, it's not relevant anymore. You don't need to worry about this, right? This team right now, we think could be the number 2 team in the country. And based off of the surrounding teams in the top 10, right? Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, you can make the argument of, okay, well, it's not like everything is wacky. It's just there's an outlier in here that is very, very particular of what we're thinking. And the next thing that I kind of jumped to was, okay, well, what about Clemson? Because Clemson, they have one loss on the year. It was the first game of the year to Georgia, who was number 1 at the time, right? They got blown out. If we look at their schedule, why wouldn't they be at the top of the list either? Well, look at who they've played. Appalachian State, NC State, Stanford, Florida State, Wake Forest, Virginia. These teams have not been remotely close to the top 25. I think NC State started the first 2 or 3 weeks within the top 25, but right at the bottom of it. No one else has had a good season. So we've talked about this before on the show. Everything about rankings is about who you played and when you played them, right? If Clemson maybe would have had Florida State at game 2, game 3, when no one was really seeing the writing on the wall, all apologies to you, Paul.
Yeah.
You might be saying, okay, they might be more competitive, but they're getting these teams at points in the timeline where people are shaking their heads saying that's not a high quality team. They finally play Louisville, and we're going to get a much better understanding of where they are. But as of right now, there's a lot of ones over here that I don't think are going to be highly accurate, but there's enough in here that has a good basis to say, okay, the right teams are in here, but the order is very, very interesting.
Yeah, that is so true, Peyton. I mean, like looking at these, it is very, very interesting. So now when you switched it up and Notre Dame went to number 8, which makes a lot more sense to me. What did you do to change the results there?
So this is, if you see right here, it's rankingsrightnow.com. So if you go to the website, rankingsrightnow.com, this is what you'll see, right? This is just based off of the using the AP poll as context to help drive these predictive rankings. If you see right here, I have a very funny URL right here, which is just a local development server that I have on my computer. So I'm saying I'm playing around with some stuff. I don't want to update the production code. Let me just do this off on the side with all of the structure, but let me make one tweak. And, you know, when we move into, this is the fun week, as you mentioned leading into this, right? This is Christmas. This is when we see how close is this algorithm going to be that's been in the dark forever. So, you know, I just wanted to see if you get rid of the context, which starting next week we will, right? This algorithm will just forget all of the AP poll context because we will have the rankings from the playoff committee, and that will realign itself, and now we're good to go moving forward. But now we're in this weird limbo, very similar to like week 2 of the AP poll, where you don't really know where anybody else is. So we don't know what this poll is thinking. We have algorithms that are trained on their historical voting patterns, and which includes last year, crazy scenarios like that we saw for Florida State not getting into the college football playoff. But we take all of that context and say, this is the algorithm that is closest that we have right now to making these predictions. So this is just saying pound for pound, not taking anything else into account. What should we expect here?
You know what, down the list, Pitt and SMU right next to each other. Like that one jumps out at me because they do play this week. So whatever happens in that game, they're still locked at the hip, you know, when it comes to the playoff rankings. Now, what they need is to get, you know, to win the ACC, really, to get in the playoff. Is there anybody in here that you think that you saw, you put the numbers in and go, oh, wow, this really isn't going to, like, they really need some help to make sure that they get in this thing?
If we take a look right in here, LSU all the way down to 25 was surprising to me. That based off how they've played lately. Now they lost their last game, but Boise State, I don't know if anyone is really gassed up about their Heisman candidate, but I don't know why. Once again, it's about one of these things where you take into the schedule. They've lost a couple big games. They've lost games to Oregon, right? Like
just to Oregon. That's the only loss that they have is to Oregon, and they played Oregon better than anybody in the country has played Oregon.
By far. But once again, a million years ago, right? Like, it's the same way it's the same reason to say, well, Oregon shouldn't be number 1 because they didn't play Boise very hard. And what was it, Idaho, that they really struggled against? No, they shouldn't be number 1. I think everyone right now would say Oregon's number 1 for sure. The biggest game by far, which I think is going to have really big implications, is this Penn State-Ohio State game. If we play with the what-if simulation tool real quick, and let me go ahead and get out of the top 25. But if we play around with this game and we just flip the score, right? And we'll make this 22 and make this 24. Confirm it. We're on the right algorithm that we care about. Let's go ahead and run the simulation. What we're going to see is a little bit of a flip-flop, but there's a lot of interesting context that's coming in. Penn State at number 1. Now they're leading the pack, right? They pass Oregon. Ohio State's at number 5. So that was one of the first things that you kind of mentioned when I was thinking about, do you put a 2-loss Ohio State in the top 10 when if they were to lose this game, and as a reminder, they were in the simulation, they lose by 2. To Oregon, they lost by 1. So that's a combined 3-point loss to the number 1 and number 2 ranked teams. That's pretty much saying they're even, right? I would say everyone, and by the way, those are both road losses by 1 and by 2. So I think that everyone's saying, okay, on a neutral field, Ohio State is up there with 1, 2, and 3. So you have that situation where there's a little bit of movement, but really there's a couple, like Army might sneak in there. You have Tennessee's down to 17, which I thought was surprising. Like, there's so many different things that are really, really confusing. But that's because we've been looking at the AP poll this whole time. And when the AP poll says Tennessee is, what is Tennessee? Tennessee is 7, and you see a 17, you say, well, that's not even remotely close. But Texas A&M at 13, BYU at 11, Miami, Indiana at 9, where right now the AP poll has Indiana at 13. I would take Indiana at 9. Do I take Ole Miss at 7? No, I don't think so. So there's little blips here and there where you're kind of like, that might make a really interesting argument. And who really knows what this panel is taking into account when they're making these valuations to say Ole Miss has had a couple of really tough games. Alabama has still just blew out Mizzou, even though Mizzou was on a backup quarterback, right? Missouri at 15, probably too high, right? There's all these. Michigan is still in the conversation here. I don't know exactly what to make of this. It will be very interesting to have it all laid out and say, wow, this was nowhere even close, or there were a couple of bold predictions in here that actually led to some really interesting insights that we can look back and say, wow, that was a really big play right there. And it had significant playoff implications before anyone even knew it.
Yeah. So what other games this week are you looking at that could really genuinely affect this? Because Pitt and SMU, we saw that doesn't really change much. We've got a lot of, it's like Texas is off this week, so there's going to be some teams that are sitting and watching. But who do you think kind of affects this week? Is it A&M and South Carolina? A&M do they need style points in that one, or are they okay because they're an SEC team?
I think they're okay because they're an SEC team, to be honest. They have the resume now, right? Once again, they have a loss against Notre Dame early in the year. South Carolina's played a lot of teams really closely. Let's just have South Carolina winning this 27-23, and let's go ahead and run this. And then there's one other game that I think has enormous implications and why I'm very curious and why people aren't talking about it enough. But right here, what was the game just to remind everyone, Texas A&M and South Carolina. If you look at A&M, they're dropping down a bunch to number 23 in the non-AP influenced predictions here. So we can do the same thing over here and see where the AP influenced algorithm has them. Let's just go ahead and go over to the what if simulation real quick. And let's do the same exact change. But one game that is really, really particular to me, and mostly just because I'm the only one like spinning my head over here thinking, oh my gosh, I can't believe what's going on over here. Texas A&M down to 19. So you have 18 or you have 23 over here, 19 over here. I don't know if A&M will be able to make up that much ground with only a few games left going into the year to consider themselves playoff eligible there. That might be the knockout punch. Clemson and Louisville is enormous. Clemson does not have a legitimate win on their schedule right now. They have a bunch of uncontested layups. If they don't have a major win here, I don't see how I don't see how you could have a 2-loss Clemson team in a significant position for the playoff committee to be in those top 12 teams. And who would be left in the ACC?
Well, I mean, Pitt, Pitt, SMU, Miami.
I always forget that SMU is still in the ACC. It still makes me giggle. So if Clemson gets knocked out against Louisville, and Louisville's all their losses this year, let's go ahead and just take a look at their schedule. All their losses are legit losses. 7 points to Notre Dame, 7 points to SMU, 7 points to Miami. They can play. So they're 3 touchdowns away from being in a completely different spot. This will be very interesting for them to face off with Clemson, and it could be the end of Clemson's run for being considered a elite team in this 2024 season, even though they've been on fire lately.
Yeah. This is wild. So how will you take information in this week, and then Tuesday when you get that info, how does that change? I know it's not going to change everything you do, but it's going to inform some math you might have to change, right?
Yes. So let's get really under the hood here. You want to see how the engine's running. So you have all of these teams that are at the bottom of the list, right? Let's just say Kent State is predicted to be the last and worst team next to Kennesaw State. I don't think anyone's arguing these bottom 5 if you've been following college football this year. But a lot of these teams are all fighting for different positions. The algorithm is focused on this AP, I need to stop getting used to saying that, the playoff committee top 25. Once all the games have happened, we'll have our final predictions. We'll have our newsletter, our YouTube video, all the different things. We'll blast it all out. Starting next week, we'll go ahead and talk as well there. The algorithm is looking at the top 25. What's also interesting is that a lot of people love to argue with me on social media when one team has like 2 AP votes and say, oh, well, they're ranked 31st. Yeah, sure, I guess. But the playoff committee only releases their top 25, hard stop, that's it. They don't give you points. They don't tell you who's close, whereas there's a gap. Is there a significant gap between 8 and 9, or are they neck and neck right next to each other? We don't know. So the algorithm is going to readjust to the top 25, keep the same algorithm, and then we just move forward. So the only reason why this one can be so wacky is because Notre Dame could be 18 for all we know. But for what they've done historically in the past, the closest prediction that we can come to that also takes into account all of the future weeks that have happened in previous years, we're sitting with Notre Dame at number 2. So if Notre Dame really goes down to 6, Notre Dame moves to 6. Everything readjusts. The algorithm stays the same, but it now has a new starting point to go off of to make even more accurate predictions moving forward.
Wow. By the way, the fact that Alabama would be at 8 in any scenario in this thing is total nonsense. Total nonsense.
Once again, you just have those weird ones. Same thing. Ole Miss and Alabama right next to each other was eye roll. I didn't even see Ole Miss. It's like I blocked them out of my vision. I didn't even see Ole Miss. Right.
No, neither of them belong
exactly.
in that
Once
spot.
Again, where is it? Like Ole Miss is at 15 right now with the AP based one. If we look at Alabama, right? If that Vanderbilt one really hurts them for sure. I think it's the algorithm saying 34-0 to a ranked Missouri team. And look at where Missouri is in this non-AP influenced algorithm. They're sitting at 15 after moving down 2 slots. So you can look at the different weeks here. Mizzou was at 8 at week 9. And then they lost and they dropped down 5 slots. So I think what is really happening is this algorithm is saying, oh my gosh, Alabama just destroyed this team that we valued highly. But we kind of know the context that really was surrounding that game. And so we don't value that game. The algorithm does, But we as humans are saying, no. That wasn't a real Mizzou team. That was a secondary quarterback. That was not what we were expecting. So if you get rid of, that was at Tennessee, right? Tennessee on the road, losing by 7, a highly a competitive team. Vanderbilt is one that definitely is going to haunt them if they don't get into this year. But I think Vanderbilt is now having a lot more respect, even after what they did to Texas. Like, I don't know. I can only make predictions. That's the lame part about being a machine learning or a data scientist. I can only make the predictions, and hopefully the algorithm gives us a little bit of fun insight, but definitely makes you wonder when you look at some of these teams like Miami down to 10. Hey man, I would have thought they would have been a little bit more higher, and you have Alabama saying I thought they would have been a little bit lower.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Payton, enjoy the weekend. You're going to need to crack a couple beers, I'm sure, to get through it all. We'll figure it out. But I will talk to you. You will see him on the Triple Option channel on Monday with some short. Like, they're not going to be long. We're not going to inundate you with numbers. Peyton's going to pick out important things to look at. We're going to hit it hard, and then you'll see Payton on the Triple Option channel on Monday. Of course, go to Rankings Right Now. You have a YouTube channel as well, there on Rankings Right Now. So this is
if you want to nerd out, come to the YouTube channel, read the newsletter, and super excited to be on Triple Option, and we're going to have a lot of fun.
This is what you call in the biz a collab. Yeah, this is a collab. This is like Mr. Beast and another person who has less followers but still is popular like Mr. Beast. I'm 44. I'm lucky I even know who he is. So, yeah, that's what this is like. Payton, we'll talk to you next week, buddy.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
Payton Soicher, Rankings Right Now. Next up, we've got Kenneth Davis.